So, as I said, my name is Janett Egber. You do hear a bit of an accent. I think some of you have met me before, but for those of you that haven't, I was born in Mexico City, so it is a Spanish-speaking accent, although I've been in Melbourne for almost 20 years now, so I feel like Melbourne is home. Just a little bit about me for those of you that it's the first time you're seeing me here today. Why would I have joined AAT, and where is this coming from? So when I was very little growing up, my dad used to run a family business. So my dad ran an import-export business in Mexico, and growing up I never really asked myself what I wanted to be. Because as the eldest of two daughters, you're expected to run the family business when you grow up. You study whatever you need to study, you do the degree you need to do just do the best job you can at continuing. Clearly I'm not in Mexico City and I'm not running a family business. So something changed along the ways. When I was around, it would have been what you call here the gap year, so finishing high school, I get a chance to do a bit of travel before university. And I remember my dad saying, you know, when you're traveling, we'll meet you at the airport because I'm going to be there for business. And I go, great, you know, my dad travels for business, pretty normal. So I'm there at the airport and I'm walking to see my dad. And my dad is walking there with my mum. Now that doesn't happen when my dad goes there for business. So they go, oh, why don't you grab a seat? And I go, sure. Is everything okay? So of course I didn't know what was happening. Not everything was okay. They had to close the business fairly quickly. I mean, it goes without saying that the instability in other countries is very different to the way we do business here, which I come to appreciate much more. But anyway, that was the end of what I thought my life would look like for the rest of my life. So all of a sudden was like, right, I have a choice. What am I going to do with my life? Now I smile and laugh about it. Obviously that day that I wasn't smiling or laughing. But anyway, it probably took me almost 20 years later to realize where that passion for small business was coming from. So I started my career here in Melbourne mainly. I studied statistics, then I did a Masters of Marketing at the business school here, fabulous school. And then I ended up in market research or customer experience like they call it today. Ended up working in finance. For the last 10 years, I've been working for some of the major banks. I work at ANZ NAB. But there was a time when I was at NAB, probably about 5 years ago, and I'm thinking, where is this passion coming from? I love what I'm doing around the strategic partnerships for small business. And it was a bit of that stop and reflect to say, when I was 19, I probably had no idea and I didn't know how to help the situation of my dad. But in this new space that I'm at, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a second, there is a way to start driving a different way of influencing and supporting small business. Having worked for the banks for many years and now with AAT, it's almost going from probably one of the least trusted sources of information or advice for small business to the most. So I realized that the way that I can make more of a difference is by supporting those that are supporting small business. And this is when I found out about AAT and what it was doing and the need to continue to support you. And by supporting you is supporting a lot of the small businesses that you help with. That's when it all makes sense to me. So that was a little bit of context for those of you that, who is she and where is she coming from? So there's a little bit of background there in terms of a little bit of where I come from. So what we're going to cover today. Now you might have noticed we started to run a couple of surveys to start, like Daryl said, we need to get facts and figures on what you want. Where can we help you? Things are changing so much and the support you need is probably going to be changing continuously as well. So one of the things that we've done is we listen to some of the feedback and we're bringing a couple of key topics of interest. One of them, without a doubt, is STP. I mean, it certainly changes with the ATO, but STP would be quite specifically, driving a lot of impact for you and what you're doing. We're going to have Angela from the STP team here. I met her yesterday. She's been working in this project for, I think I just heard, over 3 years. So a lot of depth and knowledge. This has been in progress for many years. So whilst it's only going to happen next year, there's been a lot of work. So I'm delighted to have Angela covering that in quite a bit of detail. By the way, yesterday we had that session, very interactive, lots of questions. So I do encourage you to ask questions as you go, because we have a fabulous opportunity today on that. Now, cybersecurity is another one. Cybersecurity impacting on, everyone today. It's one of those issues that we constantly need to know what's happening out there and how to protect ourselves. So we'll talk a little bit about how to protect yourselves and where you can find more information about it. We're very happy to have Receipt Bank outside, so we'll hear a little bit more about those opportunities. And the last session has had just fabulous feedback as well. Very specific on how to grow your practice and some very practical tools that Rochelle will take us through. So that's what the day looks like. We will have a little break just before cyber, and then we'll have a break for lunch. So a little bit about, Daryl just mentioned why IPA has stepped up the partnership with AAT. Now, this is a photo just from last week's IPA's Congress with Andrew Conway, the CEO, talking about, how we are stronger as a profession when we come together, when we collaborate. Now, from an IPA's perspective, the idea is to really lift the professionalism of the entire sector. And they really understand the role that bookkeepers, BAS agents play in this space. And they want to be working much closer with us. So the rationale for bringing together and starting to offer other opportunities, like Daryl said, it's not even just the pathway. There's a much bigger team, of course, in IPA producing content that is relevant, not just for accountants, but BAS agents and bookkeepers. So we're going to be tapping into that. Above and beyond that, advocacy, representation. IPA has a very strong voice at the highest levels of government in terms of when things are going to change, when there's consultation forums. The IPA has really lifted, the voice of small businesses in general, not just the accountants, but small businesses. So there was a beautiful alignment there in terms of how the two organizations can really leverage each other and have a much stronger voice on a lot of the issues that are impacting on small businesses. So that is a little bit about IPA that Daryl already mentioned. So today I'll just cover sort of over the next, I'll finish by 10:30. So over the next 15-20 minutes, a little bit more about the industry trends, more about small business, some of the key issues that small businesses are facing today. And I do want to finish with a couple of opportunities that we are seeing coming in, given all the change and disruption that we're seeing. So there is a bit of a theme around change. I don't know how many of you took the train this morning. I did. Have any of you was given one of these AirTasker things? So you know how you step out of the Flagstaff station and people just give you things and you go, no, thank you. Okay, thank you. Do any of you know what AirTasker is? Yes? Yeah. Have you gotten a few? So what we see, for those of you that don't, AirTasker is essentially a platform that helps you basically get someone to come and do, little. It's outsourcing one, isn't it? Exactly. It's just outsourcing tasks. I need someone to install something. You might have seen a TV ad. They're going big on TV ads. But this is part of that gig economy platform way of saying it's not just Uber, take me from here to there. It's not just Airbnb, where do I stay? If I need someone to just come and do a spring clean in my house, okay, can someone do it? Gardening? I mean, they're branching out quite a bit, but it's some of the things and new businesses we're starting to see. And there's one in particular that I'll talk about at the end of my session that is very relevant for you, because it might be a really interesting opportunity for those that want to grow their businesses. And this is all the theme around change. And you might have heard about this fourth industrial revolution. that we're going through now. So with the fourth industrial revolution, and I'll just read you the quote for a second. Since the Industrial Revolution 200 years ago, technological advances have always led to job destruction, but more jobs have always been created. Work isn't disappearing, work is changing. And coming back from the IPA Congress, there was so much discussion around, we've seen it in this industry. We've seen what's happened with the Xeros and the MYOBs, and then the add-on apps, and it's like, things are changing so fast. So what does it mean to us? And that was just a presentation from TEDx Melbourne this year. So it's quite relevant. Anyone that might want to watch it, if you go, all the TED Talks are free, but TEDx Melbourne had, that was a fabulous talk amongst a few of them. And I know when Andrew opened his talk at the Congress, he talked about that. The profession is changing, but compliance is not dead. The only thing that is dead is resistance to change. So I think it's more about acknowledging what that change means for every one of us here and our customers, and how do we help them navigate through some of this change. There's a short video that I'll play it for you, because that probably articulates what's happening much better. So if we go into, well, what does it all mean to us, and what are the trends that we see specifically in this industry? Certainly cloud, no longer people are asking about cloud. They're probably more just, how do I make sure I become more comfortable with cloud? People are starting to understand that their data will actually be much more secure in the cloud today than otherwise. Changing workforce, we see mobility as one of the key trends. People are working from anywhere. People are doing all the Skypes and the Zooms. Legislation, things continue to change. STP, we'll cover in quite a bit of detail today. The expectations of your clients. I remember even when I was in one of the banks, people no longer expect the service that you used to give them in the past. People's expectations are now impacted by how easy they use their Facebooks and their Instagrams and the things they interact with every day. So that's what they're comparing things against. Compliance, of course, technology and hardware. There's a few examples that I'll show you in a minute in terms of a couple of things that are relevant. And of course, automation, which is one of the things that probably impacting you the most. But you might have seen in that video where it talked about anything that can't be automated. Everything when you bring the human element, where you bring the empathy, where you need to develop a relationship with people. At the end of the day, people want to do business with people. People need help in their finances by someone they trust. No matter how much you automate it, there's always little mistakes, there's always things that need to be reconciled. They need to trust someone. And so as much as automation comes into play, there's a lot more value you can add through what cannot be automated. But yes, data is the new oil. And one of the key things that you look at is that exponential growth. And I think that video also showed, I think it's fascinating, this stat, that 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. I mean, even today, I don't know if you read in the news, Bitcoin reached $10,000 US dollars. And Bitcoin only in 2010, I think the article showed that someone paid 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas. They would be worth today 100 million. When we talk exponential change, if you look at the Bitcoin price, that's sort of what that looks like. But then think of the data. Think of all, our iPhones, all the data that is being not just pulled, but created. Anyone here with teenage kids or grandkids or whatever age, you see them. They're not only consuming data, they're creating their content. So when you look at data, so sensors and devices, that's what that looks like. Look at social media. Sorry, because the resolution is not very good. Voice over IP, enterprise data. So if you think of enterprise, that's tiny compared to all the data that's being created. This all has implications. But then if we start narrowing down into small business, Australia, nation of small business, 96% of businesses in Australia are small. 2.1 million businesses employ less than 20 people. 7.5 million people in Australia rely on small businesses. So you might hear a lot in the news about the big businesses and what's happening there. But the reality is that Australia is fueled by small businesses. But there's a lot of challenges for small businesses. Sincere apologies about their resolution. Cash flow. I've been in this space, like I said, for almost 20 years in Australia, always doing research, understanding what's happening in small business. Cash flow has always been a critical issue. What this chart shows, and was presented by Kate Cornell, the Small Business and Family Ombudsman, at the presentation, was payments of terms, and I'll show you what it actually shows is an international study of how long people take to pay small businesses. Australia is right here, on average 26 days. Mexico is the one actually just above. I've never really seen too many stats where Australia is after Mexico. But it's sad. And the only reason UK is the one in orange is because this was a study done in the UK. And there would have been an article you might have heard about earlier in the year about large businesses essentially using small businesses as a bank because of the payment terms. So what role can you play to encourage your small business clients to really, again, have a look and really adjust how they go about their term and the terms of payment. So cash flow has always been there. Red tape, I won't dwell into it, but it was fascinating to hear some of the quotes. Some small businesses just don't want to grow above a certain point because of red tape. This is having real implications to our overall economy. Mental health. We've seen a lot more focus and research done on mental health for small business. Because when you put together all the pressures that are going into small business, you look at the hours that people are working. And there was quite a bit of discussion in how are we looking after ourselves. You hear about all the problems probably before anyone else that your clients might be facing with their business. How are you looking after yourselves? How are you making sure you stay resilient? There was quite a bit of discussion around extremely long hours being worked by small businesses, but that 50% of increased hours past 40 hours, it only improves 25% in productivity. Or when you're working 70 hours, you really can't produce more than if you'd be working 55. So there's a lot of studies being done on mental health and focus on making sure, even us as an industry association, we do raise these issues and say, what are you doing to look after yourself? Because we understand the pressures you might be by not only running your businesses, but also when you hear about and how you're supporting your clients. Cyber, again, I really won't go into too much detail because of course we have a full session on it, but there was a quote being mentioned in one of those books in Cybersecurity. It says there's really only those two types of businesses, those that have been hacked and those that will, or now they're saying, and those that may have been and just don't know it. It's really scary, but look, we'll talk about how do you protect yourselves, and you look at the cost. The cost of cybersecurity just continues to increase. If you think of those exponential curves, I think that's what we're seeing here. But let's not get too pessimistic. What can you do about it? And I have it on the board there from yesterday. IPA is doing quite a bit of work with Deakin University, and one of the things that Deakin has released is a specific webinar course that is free, that is all about cyber and protecting small businesses. So it's a free 2-week course on SMEs cybersecurity. You can do it at your own pace. You literally just log in and sign in and just start watching the material. I do encourage you to make some time. I was going to say find time. Where do you find time? I don't know where I find time. We need to make time to be across some of these really important issues and protect ourselves, especially because of the sensitivity of the data that you might be dealing with. So if you don't have a chance to write it down, you can take a photo, or just it's going to be on the board for the rest of the day. But I do encourage you to have a look at that. So that's done by Deakin, and I saw the presentation. I think David will use some of that when he presents later today. And he'll also talk about cyber insurance, which is of course a growing area. This is from the XeroCon, the uni day that was focusing on BAS agents and bookkeepers. And Rochelle will cover this in quite a bit of detail, but it was talking all about the pricing power of getting the price you deserve for the value you create. So articulating your value. And that quote really goes back to where we started. Yes, anything that will be digitized, automated, that will. But anything that can't will become much more valuable. So it's the support you give, the advice, and I know not as advisors, but use more than certainly sitting down with your clients and having very important conversations that will impact on their businesses. And this is another research that was done very recently on a range of small businesses. If you can't see it at the back, the question says, what makes a successful business? And the list goes, good financial management, right at the top, 58%, positive word of mouth, repeat business, productive staff, etc. So whilst they talk about small businesses going into business because they have so much passion for something that they love doing, really, at the end of the day, what makes it successful is good financial management. And that's where they need help. And that's where you come in. So how do you articulate the value you bring into the table? Because it's not about the things that can be automated. It's about the things that can't. And the conversations you can have and the interpretation you can do of the data and the interpretation you can do on how their business is actually going. So good financial management, number one. And I did want to touch onto an opportunity that is, I'll just spend 2-3 minutes on this one. So given all the disruption that's happening in this space, we do see new companies coming in and tapping into spaces that haven't really been disrupted. One of them is MyProsperity. Now, how many of you here have heard of MyProsperity? A couple. Great. There was a beautiful article in the magazine. There's more magazines outside. I do encourage you to read it because they're actually understanding the value that bookkeepers and BAS agents can do. So what is MyProsperity? We've been looking at so many opportunities in the business space, but what about the personal wealth management space? So they've developed a platform where you integrate everything from what is your property worth to potentially your investment property to shares, your super, all in one place. I don't know about you, but when I think of, oh, where do I have this and that, I'm trying to make sense of it in my head. So the way they position it is, the financial world sorted in one place. So guess what? Whilst the advisor needs to put it all together and give advice on it, they need a partner, they need a bookkeeper to help set it all up. And they're starting to really understand the importance of working very closely with bookkeepers to get this business up and running. They've had enormous growth already. I think they've only been in business like a year and a half. By the way, their CEO is Chris Reed. So for those of you that don't know, Chris Reed used to be the CEO for Xero, that started here many years ago. He got it from about 5 people to many hundreds. So it's one of those opportunities that they've understood the space really well. They understand there's a gap in the market in personal wealth, and they're going for it. And now they have a bookkeepers proposition. Why bookkeepers? Because you already have the trust of your clients, you already are experienced, you're qualified, and in terms of the setup, compared to the advisor, it's really cost effective. So they're bringing it together. So what does the opportunity look like? What is the revenue upside for bookkeepers? in their experience, and like I said, I do encourage you to read the article in the magazine, 3 to 5 clients implementations per week can generate anywhere between 40 to 65,000 of additional annual income. Why? And this is just a high level stats. Okay, yes, you know how I said that's 2.1 million businesses in Australia, small businesses, so they wouldn't mind understanding how their wealth overall is looking like. Then you have your landlords, another 1.8 million landlords, and then in addition to that, it's estate planning and insurance. So the way they sort of market, and they're saying, okay, even if we only get 5%, so this is just a new player in the market that's tapping into some of these new opportunities. So you hear change, disruption, automation. Well, some people are looking at this as, well, how do I tap into a space that hasn't been disrupted? And there's an opportunity for you. So if you want to tap into this, literally they have a Bookkeepers program and it's free. You can do the training online, you can get your certified, you sign up there and you're registered. Like I said, if you want to hear a real story, have a look at the article in the magazine that is out there, or it might be hopefully in your homes, and just have a look at myprosperity.com.au. But really, I just wanted to finish with, yes, change is here. Yes, we all need to adapt to what's happening, but there are going to be some very interesting opportunities for everyone.